hello and welcome back for those who are joining us for the book club. I will be here in a second. I'm just putting the kettle on and getting my tea ready for this adventure. Hello, everyone, welcome back. I am the only one here, but that does not matter for now. I am gonna start in a minute. Double stream indeed. I actually want to put the chat on for this. Oh boy. What did I do? Okay. Okay, this is gonna be... Ah, nice. We'll make the chat a bit bigger. This is all about us having a nice little time, having a nice tea or any hot beverage, and listening to some short stories. Well, or in my case, reading it up. But yes, double stream today. Indeed, I just wanted to have a little chill between this and Dragon Age. Because, well, I'm gonna be reading for like an hour or so. Don't want it to be too long. It's gonna go up on YouTube as well, in case someone misses it. Like I started putting my VODs or WODs up on YouTube so that it's available for everyone who cannot make it. and it's available for longer than what Twitch supports, so to say. Yeah, I'm gonna be reading this today. It is mirrored, but it's Smoke and Mirrors by Neil Gaiman. It's a collection of short stories written by him, and some of them are great. I have not read the full book just yet. KW, I know. I know. I have not yet read the full book just yet, so this is a perfect time to actually do that. It's not like I advertise my YouTube anywhere. I literally made it 2 days ago. I don't care if anyone watches it. Honestly. It's just for me to keep them somewhere that's not on my PC taking up space. Okay. First one. It's quite a short one. It is but a tiny page. Reading the entrails, a rondel. I mean, she said that one can't help growing older. One can't, perhaps, said Humpty Dumpty, but two can. With proper assistance, you might have left off at 7. Lewis Carroll through the looking glass. And this is just like, I guess, just something to preface the whole book, the whole collection. They will call it chance or luck or call it fate. These cards and stars that tumble as they will tomorrow manifest and brings the bill for every kiss and kill the small and great. We want to know the future, love, then wait. I will answer your impatient questions. Still, they will call it chance or luck or call it fate. These cards and stars that tumble as they will. I will come to you tonight, dear, when it's late. You will not see me, you may feel a chill. I will wait until you sleep, then take my fill, and that will be your future on a plate. They will call it chance or luck or call it fate. So yeah, this is the first little bit of the from the book. I'm probably not gonna offer much commentary because I am not great at that. But feel free to discuss shit. Either with me or the others in chat. Just want this to be chill. We have a little nice fireplace as well. I almost said firework, even though that is not the thing. So, yeah. I mean, what else to do on a Sunday night but listen to stories or read? Or, well, I mean, you can play games as well. I'd like to do that. But, shh. I will just ramble around. Until my tea is actually ready. I am drinking one that's called Piccadilly Blend. It's a black tea with some extra shit in it. It tastes quite... I think it was the apricot one. That was either Piccadilly Blend or the no, the Piccadilly Blend is actually the one that tastes a bit like short biscuits. It's really nice. It's quite sweet by itself as well. What extra shit? I really don't know. It's I can actually bring it here just to check it. Like I should have it somewhere, but black tea with flavoring. That is the thing. Like it's from Vitard. Let me check. It's not on this one. It is in the box of Regal Blend, but they no longer do Regal Blend, so we have Piccadilly instead. There it is. Piccadilly Blend. So, don your top hat and take a trip to town with our delightful fruity Piccadilly Blend. Bringing together the best of British and Eastern tea tradition, we've blended a classic black tea with floral flavors of rose, strawberry, and lotus, luxuriantly layered with colored petals. Radiant, fragrant, and subtly sweet. It's a beautiful brew for the afternoon. Yep, extra shit. It actually tastes really nice. Like, Vitard of Chelsea, their teas are great. Like loose leaf teas. They have a really nice whiskey blend as well. Like, whiskey tea. Black tea as well, but it just tastes so good. And I don't like whiskey to start with, but that tea is great. That tea is indeed great. Whiskey tea, yeah, it's one of Dean's favorites. It tastes amazing. Like, I am I am a big fan of mate, which is a herbal type of tea, which has quite a gunpowdery flavor. Yeah, I know. I mean, you are free to enjoy it. I am not a big fan of the taste. I might not have tried good ones. It might be the problem, but then again, like not everything is for everyone, and that's okay. We are very PMA here. So, next short story is Chivalry, which is quite an entertaining one, and it's a couple of pages, so it's gonna take a bit more than the little poem from the start of the book. But I quite like this one. I actually read this one. Chivalry. Mrs. Whittaker found the Holy Grail. It was under a fur coat. Every Thursday afternoon, Mrs. Whittaker walked down to the post office to collect her pension, even though her legs were no longer what they were, and on the way back home, she would stop in at the Oxfam shop and buy herself a little something. The Oxfam shop sold old clothes, knickknacks, oddments, bits and bobs, and large quantities of old paperbacks, all of them donations, second-hand flotsam, often the house clearances of the dead. All the profits went to charity. Mary sat by the till with a copy of Modern Woman magazine, filling out a "Reveal Your Hidden Personality" questionnaire. Every now and then she would flip to the back of the magazine and check the relative points assigned to an A, B, or C answer before making up her mind how she would respond to the question. Mrs. Whittaker pottered around the shop. They still hadn't sold the stuffed cobra, she noted. It had been there for 6 months now, gathering dust, glass eyes gazing balefully at the clothes racks and the cabinet filled with chipped porcelain and chewed toys. Mrs. Whittaker patted its head as she went past. She picked out a couple of Mills and Boone novels from a bookshelf, Her Thundering Soul and Her Turbulent Heart, a shilling each, and gave careful consideration to the empty bottle of Matthäus Rosé with a decorative lampshade on it, before deciding she really didn't have anywhere to put it. She moved the rather threadbare fur coat, which smelled badly of mop-walls. Underneath it was a walking stick and a water-stained copy of Romance and Legend of Chivalry by A. R. Hope, Moncrief, priced at 5 pence. Next to the book on its side was The Holy Grail. It had a little round paper sticker on the base, and written on it, in felt pen, was the price, 30 pence. Mrs. Whittaker picked up dusty silver goblet and appraised it through her thick spectacles. This is nice, she called to Marie. Mary shrugged. It would look nice on the mantelpiece. Mary shrugged again. Mrs. Whittaker gave 50 pence to Marie, who gave her 10 pence change and a brown paperback to put the books and the Holy Grail in. Then she went next door to the butcher's and bought herself a nice piece of liver. Then she went home. The inside of the goblet was thickly coated with a brownish red dust. Mrs. Whittaker washed it out with great care, then left it to soak for an hour in warm water, with a dash of vinegar added. Then she polished it with metal polish until it gleamed, and between a small soulful china basset found and a photograph of her late husband Henry on the beach at Frinton, 1953. She had been right. It did look nice. For dinner that evening, she had the liver fried in breadcrumbs with onions. It was very nice. The next morning was Friday. On alternate Fridays, Mrs. Whittaker and Mrs. Greenberg would visit each other. Today it was Mrs. Greenberg's turn to visit Mrs. Whittaker. They sat in the parlor and ate macaroons and drank tea. Mrs. Whittaker took 1 sugar in her tea, but Mrs. Greenberg took sweetener, which she always carried in her handbag in a small plastic container. That's nice, said Mrs. Greenberg, pointing at the grail. What is it? It's the Holy Grail, said Mrs. Whittaker. It's the cup that Jesus drank out of at the Last Supper. Later at the crucifixion, it called his precious blood when the centurion's spear pierced his side. Mrs. Greenberg sniffed. She was small and Jewish and didn't hold with unsanitary things. I wouldn't know about that, she said, but it's very nice. Our Myron got one just like that when he won the swimming tournament, only it's got his name on the side. Is he still with that nice girl, the hairdresser? Bernice? Oh, yes. They are thinking of getting engaged, said Mrs. Greenberg. That's nice, said Mrs. Whittaker. She took another macaroon. Mrs. Greenberg baked her own macaroons and brought them over every alternate Friday. Small, sweet, light brown biscuits with almonds on top. They talked about Myron and Bernice and Mrs. Whittaker's nephew, Ronald. She had no children. And about their friend, Mrs. Perkins, who was in hospital with her hip, poor dear. The doorbell. Wait, no. At midday, Mrs. Greenberg went home, and Mrs. Whittaker made herself cheese on toast for lunch. And after lunch, Mrs. Whittaker took her pills, the white and the red one, and two little orange ones. The doorbell rang. Mrs. Whittaker answered the door. It was a young man with shoulder-length hair, so fair it was almost white, wearing gleaming silver armor, with a white surcoat. "Hello," he said. "Hello," said Mrs. Whittaker. "I'm on a quest," he said. "That's nice," said Mrs. Whittaker, non-committally. "Can I come in?" he said. Mrs. Whittaker shook her head. "I'm sorry, I don't think so," she said. "I'm on a quest for the Holy Grail." The young man said, "Is it here?" "Have you got any identification?" Mrs. Whittaker asked. She knew that it was unwise to let unidentified strangers into your home when you were elderly and living on your own. Handbags get emptied and worse than that. The young man went back down the garden path. His horse, a huge grey charger, big as a shire horse, its head high and its eyes intelligent, was tethered to Mrs. Whittaker's garden gate. The knight fumbled in the saddlebag and returned with a scroll. It was signed by Arthur, King of all Britons, and charged all persons of whatever rank or station to know that here was Galad, Knight of the Round Table. Knight of the Table Round, and that he was on a right high and noble quest. There was a drawing of the young man below that. It wasn't a bad likeness. Mrs. Whittaker nodded. She had been expecting a little card with a photograph on it, but this was far more impressive. "I suppose you had better come in," she said. They went into the kitchen. She made Galahad a cup of tea, and then she took him into the parlor. Galahad saw the grill on her mantelpiece and dropped to one knee. He put down the teacup carefully on the russet carpet. A shaft of light came through the net curtains and painted his old face with golden sunlight and turned his hair into a silver halo. "It is truly the Sangral," he said, very quietly. He blinked his pale blue eyes 3 times, very fast, as if he were blinking back tears. He lowered his head, as if in silent prayer. Galahad stood up again and turned to Mrs. Whittaker. "Gracious lady, keeper of the Holy of Holies, let me now depart this place with the blessed chalice, that my journeyings may be ended and my geese fulfilled." Sorry?" said Mrs. Whittaker. Galahad walked over to her and took her old hands in his. "My quest is over," he told her. "The Sangral is finally within my reach." Mrs. Whittaker pursed her lips. "Can you pick up your teacup and saucer, please?" she said. Galahad picked up his teacup, apologetically. No, I don't think so," said Mrs. Whittaker. "I rather like it there. It's just right, between the dog and the photograph of my Henry." "Is it gold you need? Is that it? Lady, I can bring you gold." "No, said Mrs. Whittaker. "I don't want any gold, thank you. I'm simply not interested." She ushered Galahad to the front door. "Nice to meet you," she said. His horse was leaning its head over her garden fence, nibbling her gladioli. Several of the neighborhood children were standing on the pavement watching it. Galahad took some sugar lumps from the saddlebag and showed the braver of the children how to feed the horse, their hands held flat. The children giggled. One of the older girls stroked the horse's nose. Galahad swung himself up onto the horse in one fluid movement. Then the horse and the knight trotted off down the Hawthorne Crescent. Mrs. Whittaker watched them until they were out of sight, then sighed and went back inside. The weekend was quiet. On Saturday, Mrs. Whittaker took the bus into Maresfield to visit her nephew Ronald and his wife, Euphonia, and their daughters Clarissa and Dillian. She took them a currant cake she had baked herself. On Sunday morning, Mrs. Whittaker went to church. Her local church was St. James the Less, which was a little more. Don't think of this as a church, think of it as a place where like minded friends hang out and are joyful. Then Mrs. Whittaker felt entirely comfortable with, but she liked the vicar, the Reverend Bartholomew, when he wasn't actually playing the guitar. Thank you for the host, Jim, thank you. After the service, she thought about mentioning to him that she had the Holy Grail in her front parlor, but decided against it. On Monday morning, Mrs. Whittaker was working in the back garden. She had a small herb garden she was extremely proud of: dill, vervain, mint, rosemary, thyme, and a wild expanse of parsley. She was down on her knees, wearing thick green gardening gloves, weeding and picking out slugs and putting them in a plastic bag. Mrs. Whittaker was very tender-hearted when it came to slugs. She would take them down to the back of her garden, which bordered on the railway line, and throw them over the fence. She cut some parsley for the salad. There was Cuff behind her. Galad stood there, tall and beautiful, his armor glinting in the morning sun. In his arms he held a long package, wrapped in oiled leather. I'm back, he said. Hello, said Mrs. Whittaker. She stood up, rather slowly, and took off her gardening gloves. Well, she said, now you're here, you might as well make yourself useful. She gave him the plastic bag full of slugs and told him to tip the slugs out over the back fence. He did. Then they went into the kitchen. Tea or lemonade? She asked. Whatever you are having, Galahad said. Mrs. Whittaker took a jug of her homemade lemonade from the fridge and sent Galahad outside to pick a sprig of mint. She selected 2 tall glasses. She washed the mint carefully and put a few leaves in each glass, then poured the lemonade. Is your horse outside? She asked. Oh yes, his name is Grizzle. And you have come a long way, I suppose. A very long way. I see, said Mrs. Whittaker. She took a blue plastic basin from under the sink and half filled it with water. Galahad took it out to Grizzle. He waited while the horse drank and brought the empty basin back to Mrs. Whittaker. Now, she said, I suppose you are still after the Grail. Aye. Still do I seek the Sangreal, he said. He picked up the leather package from the floor, put it down on her tablecloth, and unwrapped it. For it, I offered you this. It was a sword, its blade almost 4 feet long. There were words and symbols traced elegantly along the length of the blade. The hilt was worked in silver and gold, and a large jewel was set in the pommel. It's very nice, said Mrs. Whittaker, doubtfully. This, said Galahad, is the sword Balmung forged by Wayland Smith in the dawn times. Its twin is Flumberge. Who wears it is unconquerable in war and invincible in battle. Who wears it is incapable of a cowardly act or an ignoble one. Set in its pommel is the Sardonex Burcon, which protects its possessor from poison slipped into wine or ale and from the treachery of friends. Mrs. Whittaker peered at the sword. It must be sharp, she said after a while. It can slice a falling hair in twain. Nay, it can slice a sunbeam, said Galahad proudly. Well then, maybe you ought to put it away, said Mrs. Whittaker. Don't you want it? Galahad seemed disappointed. No, thank you, said Mrs. Whittaker. It occurred to her that her late husband, Henry, would have quite liked it. He would have hung it on the wall in his study next to the stuffed carp he had caught in Scotland and pointed it out to visitors. Galahad rewrapped the oiled leather around the sword, Balmung, and tied it up with white cord. He sat there, disconsolate. Miss Whittaker made him some cream cheese and cucumber sandwiches for the journey back and wrapped them in greaseproof paper. She gave him an apple for Grizzle. He seemed very pleased with both gifts. She waved them both goodbye. That afternoon, she took the bus down to the hospital to see Mrs. Perkins, who was still in with her hip, poor love. Mrs. Whittaker took her some homemade fruitcake, although she had left out the walnuts from the recipe because Mrs. Perkins's teeth weren't what they used to be. She watched a little television that evening and had an early night. On Tuesday, the postman called. Mrs. Whittaker was up in the box room at the top of the house, doing a spot of tidying and taking each step slowly and carefully. She didn't make it downstairs in time. The postman had left her a message which said that he had tried to deliver a packet, but no one was home. Mrs. Whittaker sighed. She put the message into her handbag and went down to the post office. The package was from her niece, Cheryl, in Sydney, Australia. It contained photographs of her husband, Wallace, and her two daughters, Dixie and Violet, and the conch shell pegged in cotton wool. Mrs. Whittaker had a number of ornamental shells in her bedroom. Her favorite had a view of the Bahamas done on it in enamel. It had been a gift from her sister, Ethel, who had died in 1983. She put the shell and the photographs in her shopping bag. Then, seeing that she was in the area, she stopped in at the Oxfam shop on her way home. "Hello, Mrs. W," said Mary. Mrs. Whittaker stared at her. Mary was wearing lipstick, possibly not the best shade for her, nor particularly expertly applied, but, thought Mrs. Whittaker, that would come with time, and a rather smart skirt. It was a great improvement. "Oh, hello, dear," said Mrs. Whittaker. "There was a man in here last week, asking about the thing you bought. The little metal cup thing? I told him where to find you. You don't mind, do you?" "Oh, no, dear," said Mrs. Whittaker. "He found me." "He was really dreamy, really dreamy," sighed Mary wistfully. I could have gone for him. And he had a big white horse and all." "Oh, and he had a big white horse and all," Mary concluded. She was standing up straighter as well. Mrs. Whittaker noted approvingly. On the bookshelf, Mrs. Whittaker found a new Mills and Boon novel, Her Majestic Passion, although she hadn't yet finished the two she had bought on her last visit. She picked up the copy of Romance and Legend of Chivalry and opened it. It smelled musty. Ex Libris Fisher was neatly handwritten at the top of the first page in red ink. She put it down where she had found it. When she got home, Galad was waiting for her. He was giving the neighborhood children rides on Grizzle's back, up and down the street. "I'm glad you are here," she said. "I've got some cases that need moving." She showed him up the box room in the top of the house. He moved all the old suitcases for her, so she could get to the cupboard at the back. It was very dusty up there. She kept him up there most of the afternoon, moving things around while she dusted. Galad had a cut on his cheek, and he held one arm a little stiffly. They talked a little while she dusted and tidied. Mrs. Whittaker told him about her late husband, Henry, and how the life insurance had paid the house off, and how she had all these things, but no one really to leave them to. No one but Ronald, really, and his wife only liked modern things. She told him how she had met Henry during the war, when he was in the ARP, and she hadn't closed the kitchen blackout curtains all the way, and what? Yeah, okay, that's fine. All the way, and about the sixpenny dances they went to in the town, and how they'd gone to London when the war had ended, and she'd had her first drink of wine. Galad told Mrs. Whittaker about his mother, Elaine, who was flighty and no better than she should have been, and something of a witch to boot, and his grandfather, King Pelles, who was well-meaning, although at best a little vague, and of his youth in the castle of Blynd on the Joyous Isle, and his father, whom he knew as Le Chevalier Maffet, who was more or less completely mad, and was in reality Lancelot du Lac, greatest of knights in disguise, and bereft of his wit, and of Galad's days as a young squire in Camelot. At 5 o'clock, Mrs. Whittaker surveyed the box room and decided that it met her approval. Then she opened the window so the room could air, and they went downstairs to the kitchen, where she put on the kettle. Galad sat down at the kitchen table. He opened the leather purse at his waist and took out a round white stone. It was about the size of a cricket ball. "My lady," he said, "this is for you, and you give me the Sangreal." Mrs. Whittaker picked up the stone, which was heavier than it looked, and held it up to the light. It was milkily translucent, and deep inside its flecks of silver glittered and glinted in the late afternoon sunlight. It was warm to the touch. Then, as she held it, a strange feeling crept over her. Deep inside, she felt stillness and a sort of peace. Serenity. That was the word for it. She felt serene. Reluctantly, she put the stone back on the table. "It's very nice," she said. That is the Philosopher's Stone, which our forefather Noah hung in the ark to give light when there was no light. It can transform the base metals into gold, and it has certain other properties, Galad told her proudly. And that isn't all, there's more. Here! From the leather bag he took an egg and handed it to her. It was the size of a goose egg, and was a shiny black color, mottled with scarlet and white. When Mrs. Whittaker touched it, the hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Her immediate impression was one of incredible heat and freedom. She heard the crackling of distant fires, and for a fraction of a second she seemed to feel herself far above the world, swooping and diving on wings of flame. She put the egg down on the table next to the Philosopher's Stone. That is the egg of the phoenix, said Galad. From far Araby it comes. One day it will out into the phoenix bird itself, and when its time comes, the bird will build a nest of flame, lay its egg, and die, to be reborn in flame in the later age of the world. I thought that was what it was, said Mrs. Whittaker. And last of all, lady, said Galad, I have brought you this. He drew it from his pouch and gave it to her. It was an apple, apparently carved from a single ruby on an amber stem. A little nervously, she picked it up. It was soft to the touch, deceptively so. Her fingers bruised it, and ruby-colored juice from the apple ran down Mrs. Whittaker's hand. The kitchen filled, almost imperceptibly, magically, with the smell of summer fruit, of raspberries and peaches and strawberries and red currants. As if from a great way away, she heard distant voices raised in song and far music on the air. It is one of the apples of the Hesperids, said Galad quietly. One bite from it, it will heal an illness or wound, no matter how deep. A second bite restores youth and beauty, and the third bite is said to grant eternal life. Mrs. Whittaker licked the sticky juice from her hand. It tasted like fine wine. There was a moment then, when it all came back to her. How it was to be young, to have a firm, slim body that could do whatever she wanted it to do. To run down a country lane for the simple, unladylike joy of running. To have men smile at her just because she was herself and happy about it. Mrs. Whittaker looked at Sir Galad, most comely of all knights, sitting fair and noble in her small kitchen. She caught her breath. And that's all I have brought for you, said Galad. They weren't easy to get either. Mrs. Whittaker put the ruby fruit down on the kitchen table. She looked at the Philosopher's Stone, and the egg of the phoenix, and the apple of life. Then she walked into her parlor and looked at the mantelpiece, at the little china basset hound, and the Holy Grail, and the photograph of her late husband Henry, shirtless, smiling and eating an ice cream in black and white, almost 40 years away. She went back into the kitchen. The kettle had begun to whistle. Poured a little steaming water into the teapot, swirled it around and poured it out. Then she added 2 spoonfuls of tea and one for the pot, and poured in the rest of the water. All this she did in silence. She turned to Galad then, and she looked at him. Put the tipple away, she told Galad firmly. You shouldn't offer things like that to old ladies. It isn't proper. She paused then. But I will take the other 2, she continued after a moment's thought. They will look nice on the mantelpiece. And 2 for 1's fair, or I don't know what is. Galad beamed. Put the ruby apple into his leather pouch. Then he went down on one knee and kissed Mrs. Whittaker's hand. Stop that, said Mrs. Whittaker. She poured them both cups of tea, after getting out the very best china, which was only for special occasions. They sat in silence, drinking their tea. When they had finished their tea, they went into the parlor. Galad crossed himself and picked up the grail. Mrs. Whittaker arranged the egg and the stone where the grail had been. The egg kept tipping on one side, and she propped it up against the little china dog. They do look very nice, said Mrs. Whittaker. Yes, agreed Galad. They do look very nice. Can I give you anything to eat before you go back? She asked. He shook his head. Some fruitcake, she said. You may not think you want any now, but you will be glad of it in a few hours' time. And you should probably use the facilities. Now, give me that, and I will prep it up for you. She directed him to the small toilet at the end of the hall, and went into the kitchen holding the grail. She had some old Christmas wrapping paper in the pantry, and she wrapped the grill in it and tied the package with twine. Then she cut a large slice of fruitcake and put it in a brown paper bag, along with a banana and a slice of processed cheese in silver foil. The lad came back from the toilet. She gave him the paper bag and the Holy Grail. Then she went up on tiptoes and kissed him on the cheek. "You are a nice boy," she said. "You take care of yourself." He hugged her, and she shooed him out of the kitchen and out of the back door, and she shut the door behind him. She poured herself another cup of tea and cried quietly into a Kleenex, while the sound of hoofbeats echoed down Hawthorne Crescent. On Wednesday, Mrs. Whittaker stayed in all day. On Thursday, she went down to the post office to collect her pension. Then she stopped in at the Oxfam shop. The woman on the till was new to her. "Where is Mary?" she asked Mrs. Whittaker. The woman on the till, who had blue-rinsed grey hair and blue spectacles that went up into diamantine points, shook her head and shrugged her shoulders. "She went off with a young man," she said. "On a horse? I ask you, I meant to be down in Heathfield shop this afternoon. I had to get my Johnny to run me up here while we find someone else." "Oh," said Mrs. Whittaker. "Well, it's nice that she'd found herself a young man." "Nice for her maybe," said the lady on the till. "But some of us were meant to be in the Heathfield this afternoon." On a shelf near the back of the shop, Mrs. Whittaker found a tarnished old silver container with a long spout. It had been priced at 60p, according to the low paper label stuck to the side. It looked a little like a flattened, elongated teapot. She picked out a Mills and Boon novel she hadn't read before. It was called Her Singular Love. She took the book and the silver container off to the woman on the till. 65p, dear," said the woman, picking up the silver object, staring at it. "Funny old thing, isn't it? Came in this morning." It had a writing carved along the side in blocky, old Chinese characters and an elegant arching handle. "Some kind of oil can, I suppose." "No, it's not an oil can," said Mrs. Whittaker, who knew exactly what it was. "It's a lamp." There was a small metal finger, ornamented, tied to the handle of the lamp with brown twine. "Actually, Mrs. Whittaker, on a second thought, I think I will just have the book." She paid her 5p for the novel and put the lamp back where she had found it, in the back of the shop. After all, Mrs. Whittaker reflected as she walked home, it wasn't as if she had anywhere to put it. Oh, okay, yeah. I will do that in a second. It's just because I am sitting back, so I will boost my voice a little bit. People have complained that my voice is usually too loud, so I will bring my microphone back as well. Yeah. So that was Chivalry. Old lady finds the Holy Grail in an Oxfam shop. Nice. Okay, I will just have it here then. There we go. Pop filter should be fine as well. Also, I'm not sure if I'm gonna get copyright striked for this, but I found this on YouTube, the fireplace video. So yeah, we will see how that goes. I have enabled the tea as well, and everything. We are just chilling. Hello, Kate. Welcome back, my friends. We are reading short stories by Neil Gaiman, and we just finished the first one, Chivalry. Welcome, readers. Welcome. Yes, thank you. I hope you had a great stream. And where is it? Yes. How did the keyboard building go? I've seen that you just went offline at one point, and I am confused. So the fireplace is not real. The fireplace is a YouTube video. Like if I go over it, it's a fireplace 10 hours full HD. Yes. Also, those who are here and don't know about Kate, please check her out. She's amazing. She does Guild Wars 2, keyboard building, and variety as well. Also, for anyone interested what type of tea I'm drinking, it's a loose leaf tea called Piccadilly Blend. No, I did not disable ads, I think. So... Oh yeah, I have ad blocker. I have ad blocker, but shh. So, I'm drinking Piccadilly Blend, which is... The description of it is Don your top hat and take a trip to town on our with our delightfully fruity Piccadilly blend. Bringing together the best of British and Eastern tea tradition, we've blended a classic black tea with floral flavors of rose, strawberry, and lotus, luxuriantly layered with colored petals. Radiant, fragrant, and subtly sweet. It's a beautiful brew for the afternoon. Shh, Lynn, don't expose me, thank you. Also, this is the fucking ugliest mug I have, and it's fucking perfect. Okay. Up next. Up next is a little piece called Nicholas Was. It's sort of a Christmas time one. But then again, it's July, so Winter's Day in July, everyone. Am I right? Nicholas was. Nicholas was older than sin, and his beard could grow no whiter. He wanted to die. The dwarfish natives of the Arctic caverns did not speak his language, but conversed in their own, twittering tongue, conducted incomprehensible rituals when they were not actually working in the factories. Once every year, they forced him, sobbing and protesting, into endless night. During the journey, he would stand near every child in the world, leave one of the dwarf's invisible gifts by its bedside. The children slept, frozen into time. He envied Prometheus and Loki, Sisyphus and Judas. His punishment was harsher. Ho ho ho. Yeah, so... I don't know what Nicholas did, but it might have been really fucking bad if that was the punishment. Yes, Neil Gaiman, indeed. Smoke and mirrors. This is what we are doing tonight. I'm probably only gonna be doing this for about 2 hours, just to spare my voice a little bit. Yeah, we are grabbing a nice hot beverage, a nice book. We are forcing ourselves to either listen to books or read them. I also have a channel in my Discord for book suggestions. I went with this one because this idea came to me a couple of days ago, and this is one of the books that I actually own, and there's a collection. So yeah, there is Discord. Feel free to join. We have memes. We have a whole channel called Dragon Age Hell. Nini or Fluxus has their own corner as well for some of the bit lewder things. And obviously catpics. And I put out notifications as well when I go live. I don't ping at everyone because I don't like that when that happens to me sometimes. So there is a whole notify role for that. Let's get back to our stories. Next one is the price. Tramps and vagabonds have marks they make on gateposts and trees and doors, letting others of their kind know a little about the people who live at the houses and farms they pass on their travels. I think cats must leave similar signs. How else to explain the cats who turn up at our door through the year, hungry and flea-ridden and abandoned? We take them in. We get rid of the fleas and the ticks, feed them, and take them to the vet. We pay for them to get their shots, and indignity upon indignity, we have them neutered or spayed. And they stay with us for a few months, or for a year, or forever. Most of them arrive in summer. We live in the country, just the right distance out of town, for the city dwellers to abandon their cats near us. We never seem to have more than 8 cats, rarely have less than 3. The cat population of my house is currently as follows: Hermione and Pod, Tabby and Black respectively, the Matt sisters who live in my attic office and do not mingle, Snowflake, the blue-eyed, long-haired white cat who lived wild in the woods for years before she gave up her wild ways for soft sofas and beds, and last but largest, Furball, Snowflake's cushion-like tortoise-shell long-haired daughter, orange and black and white, whom I discovered as a tiny kitten in our garage one day, strangled and almost dead, her head poked through an old badminton net, and who surprised us all by not dying, but instead growing up to be the best-natured cat I have ever encountered. And then there is the black cat, who has no other name than the Black Cat, and who turned up almost a month ago. We did not realize he was going to be living here at first. He looked too well-fed to be a stray, too old and jaunty to have been abandoned. He looked like a small panther, and he moved like a patch of night. One day in the summer, he was lurking about our ramshackle porch, 8 or 9 years old, At a guess. Male, greenish yellow of eye, very friendly, quite perturbable. What the fucking word? I assumed he belonged to a neighboring farmer or household. I went away for a few weeks to finish writing a book, and when I came home, he was still on our porch, living in an old cat bed one of the children had found for him. He was, however, almost unrecognizable. Patches of fur had gone, and there were deep scratches on his grey skin. The tip of one ear was chewed away. There was a gash beneath one eye, a slice gone from one lip. He looked tired and thin. We took the black cat to the vet, where we got him some antibiotics, which we fed him each night, along with soft cat food. We wondered who he was fighting: Snowflake? Our beautiful white-near feral queen? Raccoons? A red-tailed fanged possum? Each night the scratches would be worse. One night his side would be chewed up, the next it would be his underbelly, raked with claw marks and bloody to the touch. When it got to that point, I took him down to the basement to recover beside the furnace and the piles of boxes. He was surprisingly heavy, the black cat, and I picked him up and carried him down there with the cat basket and the litter box and some food and water. I closed the door behind me. I had to wash the blood from my hands when I left the basement. He stayed down there for 4 days. At first he seemed too weak to feed himself. A cut beneath one eye had rendered him almost one-eyed, and he limped and lolled weakly, thick yellow pus oozing from the cut on his lip. I went down there every morning and every night, and I fed him and gave him antibiotics, which I mixed with his canned food, and I dabbed at the worst of the cuts and spoke to him. He had diarrhea, and although I changed his litter daily, the basement stank evilly. The 4 days that the black cat lived in the basement were about 4 days in my house. The baby slipped in the bath and banged her head and might have drowned. I learned that that the project I had set my heart in, adapting Hope Murley's novel Blood in the Mist for the BBC, was no longer going to happen, and I realized that I did not have the energy to begin again from scratch, pitching it to other networks or to other media. My daughter left for summer camp and immediately began to send home a plethora of heart-tearing letters and cards, 5 or 6 each day, imploring us to bring her home. My son had kind of a fight with his best friend to the point that they were no longer on speaking terms. And returning home one night, my wife hit a deer that ran out in front of the car. The deer was killed, the car was left undrivable, and my wife sustained a small cut over one eye. By the 4th day, the cat was prowling the basement, walking haltingly but impatiently between the stacks of books and comics, the boxes of mail and cassettes, of pictures and gifts, and of stuff. He mewed at me to let him out, and reluctantly I did so. He went back onto the porch and slept there for the rest of the day. The next morning there were deep new gashes in his flanks, and clumps of black cat hair, his, covered the wooden boards of the porch. Letters arrived that day from my daughter, telling us that camp was going better and she thought she could survive a few days. My son and his friends sorted out their problem, although what the argument was about, trading cards, computer games, Star Wars, or a girl, I would never learn. The BBC executive who had vetoed Blood in the Mist was discovered to have been taking bribes, well, questionable loans, from an independent production company, and was sent home on permanent leave. His successor, I was delighted to learn when she faxed me, was the woman who had initially proposed the project to me before leaving the BBC. I thought about returning the black cat to the basement, but decided against it. Instead, I resolved to try and discover what kind of animal was coming to our house each night, and from there to formulate a plan of action. To trap it, perhaps. For birthdays and at Christmas, my family gives me gadgets and gizmos. Pricey toys which excite my fancy but ultimately rarely leave their boxes. There is a food dehydrator and an electric carving knife, a bread making machine, and last year's present a pair of see-in-the-dark binoculars. On Christmas Day, I had put the batteries into the binoculars and have walked about the basement in the dark, too impatient even to wait until nightfall, stalking a flock of imaginary starlings. You were warned not to turn it on in the light, that would have damaged the binoculars and quite possibly your eyes as well. Afterward, I had put the device back into its box and it sat there still in my office, beside the box of computer cables and forgotten bits and pieces. Perhaps I thought if the creature, dog or cat or raccoon or what have you, were to see me sitting on the porch, it would not come, so I took a chair into the box and coat room, a little larger than a closet, which overlooks the porch, and when everyone in the house was asleep, I went out onto the porch and bade the black cat good night. The cat, my wife had said, when he first arrived, is a person, and there was something very person-like in this huge leonine face. His broad black nose, his greenish yellow eyes, his fanged but amiable mouth, still leaking of amber pus from the right lower lip. I stroked his head and scratched him beneath the chin, and wished him well. Then I went inside and turned off the light on the porch. I sat on my chair in the darkness, inside the house with the sea in the dark binoculars on my lap. I had switched the binoculars on, and a trickle of greenish light came from the eyepieces. Time passed in the darkness. I experimented looking at the darkness with the binoculars, learning to focus, to see the world in shades of green. I found myself horrified by the number of swarming insects I could see in the night air. It was as if the night world were some kind of nightmare soup swimming with life. Then I lowered the binoculars from my eyes and stared out at the rich blacks and blues of the night, empty and peaceful and calm. Time passed. I struggled to keep awake, find myself profoundly missing cigarettes and coffee, my two lost addictions. Either of them would have kept my eyes open. But before I had tumbled too far into the world of sleep and dreams, a yowl from the garden jerked me fully awake. I fumbled the binoculars to my eyes and was disappointed to see that it was merely Snowflake, the white cat, streaking across the front garden like a patch of greenish-white light. She vanished into the woodland to the left of the house and was gone. I was about to settle myself back down when it occurred to me to wonder what exactly had startled Snowflake so, and I began scanning the middle distance with the binoculars, looking for a huge raccoon, a dog, or a vicious possum. And there was indeed something coming down the driveway towards the house. I could see it through the binoculars, clear as day. It was the devil. I had never seen the devil before, and although I had written about him in the past, if pressed, would have confessed that I had no belief in him other than as an imaginary figure, tragic and Miltonian. The figure coming up the driveway was not Milton's Lucifer, it was the devil. My heart began to pound in my chest, to pound so hard that it hurt. I hoped it could not see me, that in a dark house, behind window glass, I was hidden. The figure flickered and changed as it walked up to the drive. One moment it was dark, bull-like, minotaurish. The next it was slim and female, and the next it was a cat itself, a scarred, huge, grey-green wildcat, its face contorted with hate. There are steps that lead up to my porch. 4 white wooden steps, in need of a coat of paint. I knew they were white, although they were, like everything else, green through my binoculars. At the bottom of the steps, the devil stopped and called out something that I could not understand. 3, perhaps 4 words, in a whining, howling language that must have been old and forgotten when Babylon was young, and although I did not understand the words, I felt the hairs rise on the back of my head as it called. And then I heard, muffled, through the glass but still audible, a low growl, a challenge, and, slowly, unsteadily, a black figure walked down the steps of the house, away from me, toward the devil. These days, the black cat no longer moved like a panther. Instead, he stumbled and rocked, like a sailor only recently returned to land. The devil was a woman now. She said something soothing and gentle to the cat, in a tongue that sounded like French, and reached out a hand to him. He sank his teeth into her arm, and her lip curled, and she spat at him. The woman glanced up at me then, and if I had doubted that she was the devil before, I was certain of it now. The woman's eyes flashed red fire at me, but you can see no red through the night vision binoculars, only shades of green. And the devil saw me through the window. It saw me. I am in no doubt about that at all. The devil twisted and writhed, and now it was some kind of jackal, flat-faced, Huge-headed, bull-necked creature, halfway between a hyena and a dingo. There were maggots squirming in its mangy fur, and it began to walk up the steps. The black cat leapt upon it, and in a second they became a rolling, writhing thing, moving faster than my eyes could see. All this and silence. And then a low roar. Down the country road, at the bottom of our drive, in the distance lumbered a late-night truck, its blazing headlights burning bright as green suns through the binoculars. I lowered them from my eyes and saw only darkness, and the gentle yellow of headlights, and then the red of rear lights as it vanished off again into the nowhere at all. When I raised the binoculars once more, there was nothing to be seen, only the black cat on the steps, staring up into the air. I trained the binoculars up and saw something flying away. A vulture, perhaps, or an eagle, and then it flew beyond the trees and was gone. I went out onto the porch and picked up the black cat and stroked him, said kind, soothing things to him. He meowed piteously when I first approached him, but after a while he went to sleep on my lap, and I put him into the basket and went upstairs to my bed to sleep myself. There was dried blood on my t-shirt and jeans the following morning. That was a week ago. The thing that comes to my house does not come overnight, but it comes most nights. We know it by the wounds on the cat and the pain I can see in those leonine eyes. He has lost the use of his front left paw, and his right eye has closed for good. I wonder what we did to deserve the black cat. I wonder who sent him, and selfish and scared, I wonder how much more he has to give. Guys, get your own black cats. That is all I have to offer about that. Cats are great. Cats are great. I know I don't have to convince you. I have to convince your boyfriend though. But that is a different story, isn't it? I do not have that power. Yeah, be cozy. Sadly, I'm almost out of tea. That doesn't matter. Don't worry, Spyro. We will find a way to convince him. We will find a way. Yeah, I'm back live with the book club or story time or whatever you like to call it. I'm gonna do this every Sunday from 6 p.m. BST, and it's probably gonna be an hour and a half, 2 hours long, depending on the short stories and what we get through. It's just supposed to be like a little chill thing that you can listen to without like even looking on your screen, or just listen to while you're doing something else. I'm gonna put them up on YouTube as well eventually. So this one is probably gonna be up tomorrow around the time I finish the stream, so 9ish. Yeah, but yeah, on to the next story. Everyone knows about the cliche in RPGs, the freaking troll under the bridge, right? Now this short story is titled Troll Bridge, so I sort of hope it has something to do with that cliche in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, we are reading up from Neil Gaiman's Smoke and Mirrors, which is a collection of short stories of his, and I find them really entertaining. I actually owned this book before I decided to do the book club, so that's why we started this, so that I have time to collect some suggestions for our future, and I have time to put it up to vote as well. Like, I know you're in the Discord, so if you have any suggestions that you've meant to read for a while now, but you never could like sit down yourself to read it, just like pop it in. I will put up a vote at one point for the next book. Yeah, I have some of my own books as well. I don't mind reading up ones that I already done. I was thinking about maybe doing like Good Omens instead of this, because I have that as well somewhere. But this is a bit chiller, just in my opinion, because it is a collection and not a whole like story that connects. What's a flexus? What is not computing in your little brain, my friend? Or let me say your big brain, because you're a big brain friend. Please do tell me before I start the next one. Oh yeah, I'm just talking about like books. We are reading up books. It's the little cozy book corner right now. That's why there's double stream today. Oh, damn. Okay, Troll Bridge. They pulled up most of the railway tracks in the in the early 60s when I was 3 or 4. They slashed the train services to ribbons. This meant that there was nowhere to go but London, and the little town where I lived became the end of the line. My earliest reliable memory, 18 months old, my mother away in hospital having my sister, and my grandmother walking with me down to a bridge and lifting me up to watch the train below, panting and steaming like a black iron dragon. Okay. Over the next few years, they lost the last of the steam trains, and with them went the network of railways that joined village to village, town to town. I didn't know that the trains were going. By the time I was 7, they were a thing of the past. We lived in an old house on the outskirts of the town. The fields opposite were empty and fallow. I used to climb the fence and lie in the shade of a small bulrush patch and read. Or, if I were feeling more adventurous, I would explore the grounds of the empty manor beyond the fields. It had a weed-clogged, ornamental pond with a low wooden bridge over it. I never saw any groundsmen or caretakers in my forays through the gardens and woods, and I never attempted to enter the manor. That would have been courting disaster, and beside, it was a matter of fate for me that all empty old houses were haunted. It is not that I was credulous, simply that I believed in all things dark and dangerous. I was part of my young creed that the night was full of ghosts and witches, hungry and flapping and dressed completely in black. The converse held reassuringly true. Daylight was safe. Daylight was always safe. A ritual. On the last day of the summer school term, walking home from school, I would remove my shoes and socks and carrying them in my hands, walk down the stony flinty lane on pink and tender feet. During the summer holiday, I would put shoes on only under duress. I would revel in my freedom from footwear until the school term began once more in September. When I was 7, I discovered the path through the woods. It was summer, hot and bright, and I wandered a long way from home that day. I was exploring. I went past the manor, its windows boarded up and blind, across the grounds and through some unfamiliar woods. I scrambled down a steep bank, and I found myself on a shady path that was new to me and overgrown with trees. The light that penetrated the leaves was stained green and gold, and I thought I was in fairyland. A little stream trickled down the side of the path, teeming with tiny, transparent shrimps. I picked them up and watched them jerk and spin on my fingertips. Then I put them back and wandered down the path. It was perfectly straight and overgrown with short grass. From time to time, I would find these really terrific rocks, bubbly, melted things, brown and purple and black. If you held them up to the light, you could see every color of the rainbow. I was convinced that they had to be extremely valuable and stuffed my pockets with them. I walked and walked down the quiet golden green corridor and saw nobody. I wasn't hungry or thirsty. I just wondered where the path was going. It traveled in a straight line and was perfectly flat. The path never changed, but the countryside around it did. At first, I was walking along the bottom of a ravine, grassy banks climbing steeply on each side of me. Later, The path was above everything, and as I walked I could look down at the treetops below me and the roofs of occasional distant houses. My path was always flat and straight, and I walked along it through valleys and plateaus. And eventually, in one of the valleys, I came to the bridge. It was built of clean red brick, a huge curving arch over the path. At the side of the bridge were stone steps cut into the embankment, and at the top of the steps, a little wooden gate. I was surprised to see any token of the existence of humanity on my path, which I was by now convinced was a natural formation, like a volcano, and with a sense more of curiosity than anything else. I had, after all, walked hundreds of miles, or so I was convinced, and might be anywhere. I climbed the stone steps and went through the gate. I was nowhere. The top of the bridge was paved with mud. On each side of it was a meadow. The meadow on my side was a wheat field. The other field was just grass. There were caked imprints of huge tractor wheels in the dried mud. I walked across the bridge, to be sure. No trip-trap, my bare feet were soundless. Nothing for miles, just fields and wheat and trees. Picked an ear of wheat and pulled out the sweet grains, peeling them between my fingers, chewing them meditatively. I realized then that I was getting hungry and went back down the steps to the abandoned railway track. It was time to go home. I was not lost. All I needed to do was follow my path home once more. There was a troll waiting for me under the bridge. "I'm a troll," he said. Then he paused and added more or less as an afterthought, "Full roll, the whole roll." He was huge. His head brushed the top of the brick arch. He was more or less translucent. I could see the bricks and trees behind him. Dimmed, but not lost. He was all my nightmares given flesh. He had huge, strong teeth, and rending claws, and strong, hairy hands. His hair was long, like one of my sister's plastic gongs, and his eyes bulged. He was naked, and his penis hung from the bush of gong hair between his legs. "I heard you, Jack," he whispered in a voice like the wind. "I heard you trip-tapping over my bridge, and now I'm going to eat your life." I was only 7, but it was daylight, and I do not remember being scared. It is good for children to find themselves facing the elements of fairy tale. They are well equipped to deal with these. "Don't eat me," I said to the troll. I was wearing a stripy brown t-shirt and brown corduroy trousers. My hair also was brown, and I was missing a front tooth. I was learning to whistle between my teeth, but wasn't there yet. "I'm going to eat your life, Jack," said the troll. I stared the troll in the face. "My big sister is going to be coming down the path soon," I lied, "and she's far tastier than me. Eat her instead." The troll sniffed the air and smiled. "You are all alone," he said. "There's nothing else on the path, nothing at all." Then he leaned down and ran his fingers over me. It felt like butterflies were brushing my face, like the touch of a blind person. Then he snuffled his fingers and shook his huge head. "You don't have a big sister. You've only a younger sister, and she's at her friend's today." "Can you tell all that from smell?" I asked, amazed. "Trolls can smell the rainbows. Trolls can smell the stars," it whispered subtly. "Trolls can smell the dreams you dreamed before you were ever born. Come close to me and I will eat your life." "I've got precious stones in my pocket," I told the troll. "Take them, not me. Look!" I showed him the lava jewel rocks I had found earlier. "Blinker," said the troll. "The discarded refuse of steam trains. Of no value to me." He opened his mouth wide. Sharp teeth. Breath that smelled of leaf mold and the underneath of things. "Eat, now!" He became more and more solid to me, more and more real, and the world outside became flatter, began to fade. "Wait!" I dug my feet into the damp earth beneath the bridge, wiggled my toes, held on tightly to the real bird. I stared into his big eyes. "You don't want to eat my life? Not yet. I am only 7. I haven't lived at all yet. There are books I haven't read yet. I've never been on an airplane. I can't whistle yet. Not really. Why don't you let me go? When I'm older and bigger and more of a meal, I will come back to you. The troll stared at me with eyes like headlamps. Then it nodded. When, when you come back then, it said, and it smiled. I turned around and walked back down the silent straight path where the railway lines had once been. After a while, I began to run. I pounded down the tracks in the green light, puffing and blowing until I felt a stabbing ache beneath my ribcage. The pain of stitch, and clutching my side, I stumbled home. The fields started to go as I grew older. One by one, row by row, houses sprang up with roads named after wildflowers and respectable authors. Our home, an aging, tattered Victorian house, was sold and torn down. New houses covered the garden. They built houses everywhere. I once got lost in the new housing estate that covered 2 meadows I had once known every inch of. I didn't mind too much that the fields were going, though. The old manor house was bought by a multinational, and the grounds became more houses. It was 8 years before I returned to the old railway line, and when I did, I was not alone. I was 15. I changed schools twice in that time. Her name was Louise, and she was my first love. I loved her grey eyes, and her fine light brown hair, and her gawky way of walking, like a fawn just learning to walk, which sounds really dumb, for which I apologize. I saw her chewing gum when I was 13, and I fell for her like a suicide from a bridge. The main trouble with being in love with Louise was that we were best friends, and we were both going out with other people. I never told her I loved her, or even that I fancied her. We were buddies. I'd been at her house that evening. We sat in her room and played Rattus Norvegicus, the first Stranglers LP. It was the beginning of punk, and everything seemed so exciting. The possibilities, in music as in everything else, were endless. Eventually, it was time for me to go home, and she decided to accompany me. We held hands, innocently, just pals, and we strolled the 10-minute walk to my house. The moon was bright, and the world was visible and colorless, and the night sky was warm. We got to my house, saw the lights inside, and stood in the driveway and talked about the band I was starting. We didn't go in. Then it was decided that I would walk her home, so we walked back to her house. She told me about the battles she was having with her younger sister, who was stealing her makeup and perfume. Liz suspected that her sister was having sex with boys. Liz was a virgin, we both were. We stood in the road outside her house, under the sodium yellow streetlight, and we stared at each other's black lips and pale yellow faces. We grinned at each other. Then we just walked, picking quiet roads and empty paths. In one of the new housing estates, a path led us into the woodland, and we followed it. The path was straight and dark, but the lights of distant houses shone like stars on the ground, and the moon gave us enough light to see. Once we were scared, when something snuffled and snorted in front of us. We pressed close, saw it was a badger, laughed and hugged, and kept on walking. We talked quiet nonsense about what we dreamed and wanted and thought. And all the time, I wanted to kiss her and feel her breath and maybe put my hands between her legs. Finally, I saw my chance. There was an old brick bridge over the path, and we stopped beneath it. I pressed up against her, her mouth opened against mine. Then she went cold and stiff and stopped moving. "Hello," said the troll. I let go of Louise. It was dark beneath the bridge, but the shape of the troll filled the darkness. "I froze her," said the troll, "so we can talk. Now I'm going to eat your life." My heart pounded, and I could feel myself trembling. "No." "You said you would come back to me, and you have. Did you learn to whistle?" Yes." "That's good. I never could whistle." It sniffed and nodded. "I am pleased. You have grown in life and experience. More to eat. More for me." I grabbed Louise, a tall zombie, and pushed her forward. "Don't take me. I don't want to die. Take her. I bet she's much tastier than me. And she's 2 months older than I am. Why don't you take her?" The troll was silent. It sniffed Louise from toe to head, snuffing at her feet and crotch and breast and hair. Then it looked at me. She is an innocent, it said. You are not. I don't want her. I want you. I walked to the opening of the bridge and stared up at the stars in the night. But there's so much I've never done, I said, partly to myself. I mean, I've never. Well, I've never had sex. I've never been to America. I haven't. I paused. I haven't done anything. Not yet. The troll said nothing. I could come back to you when I'm older. The troll said nothing. I will come back. Honestly, I will. Come back to me, said Louise. Why? Where are you going? I turned around. The troll had gone, and the girl I thought I loved was standing in the shadows beneath the bridge. We are going home, I told her. Come on. We walked back and never said anything. She went out with the drummer in the punk band I started, and much later married someone else. We met once on a train after she was married, and she asked me if I remembered that night. I said I did. I really liked you that night, Jack, she told me. I thought you were going to kiss me. I thought you were going to ask me out. I would have said yes if you had. But I didn't. No, she said. You didn't. Her hair was cut very short. It didn't suit her. I never saw her again. The trim woman with the taut smile was not the girl I had loved, and talking to her made me feel uncomfortable. I moved to London, and then, some years later, I moved back again, but the town I returned to was not the town I remembered. There were no fields, no farms, no little flint lanes, and I moved away as soon as I could to a tiny village 10 miles down the road. I moved with my family. I was married by now, with a toddler, into an old house that had once, many years before, been a railway station. The tracks have been dug up, and the old couple who lived opposite us used it to grow vegetables. I was getting older. One day I found a grey hair. On another, I heard a recording of myself talking, and I realized I sounded just like my father. I was working in London, doing A&R for one of the major record companies. I was commuting into London by train most days, coming back some evenings. I had to keep a small flat in London. It's hard to commute when the bands you are checking out don't even stagger onto the stage until midnight. It also meant that it was fairly easy to get laid if I wanted to, which I did. I thought that Eleanor, that was my wife's name. I should have mentioned that before, I suppose. Didn't know about the other women, but I got back from a 2-week jaunt to New York one winter's day, and when I arrived at the house, it was empty and cold. She had left a letter, not a note. 15 pages, neatly typed, and every word of it was true, including the PS which read, You really don't love me, and you never did. I put on a heavy coat, and I left the house and just walked stunned and slightly numb. There was no snow on the ground, but there was a hard frost, and the leaves crunched under my feet as I walked. The trees were skeletal, black against the harsh grey winter sky. I walked down to the side of the road. Cars passed me, travelling to and from London. Once I tripped on a branch, half hidden in a heap of brown leaves, ripping my trousers, cutting my leg. I reached the next village. There was a river at right angles to the road, and a path I'd never seen before beside it, and I walked down the path and stared at the partly frozen river. It gurgled and splashed and sang. The path led off through fields. It was straight and grassy. I found a rock, half buried, on one side of the path. I picked it up, brushed off the mud. It was a melted lump of purplish stuff with a strange rainbow sheen to it. I put it into my pockets, my coat, and held it in my hand as I walked, its presence warm and reassuring. The river meandered away across the fields, and I walked in silence. I had walked for an hour before I saw houses, new and small and square, on the embankment above me. And then I saw the bridge, and I knew where I was. I was on the old railway path, and I'd been coming down it from the other direction. There were graffiti painted on the side of the bridge. Fuck, and Barry loves Susan, and the omnipresent NF of the National Front. I stood beneath the bridge in the red brick arch, stood among the ice cream wrappers and the crisp packets and the single sad used condom, and watched my breath steam in the cold afternoon air. The blood had dried into my trousers. Cars passed over the bridge above me. I could hear a radio playing loudly in one of them. "Hello?" I said, quietly, feeling embarrassment, feeling foolish. "Hello?" There was no answer. The wind rustled the crisp packets and the leaves. "I came back. I said I would. And I did. Hello?" Silence. I began to cry then, stupidly, silently, sobbing under the bridge. A hand touched my face, and I looked up. "I didn't think you would come back," said the troll. He was my height now, but otherwise unchanged. His long gong hair was unkempt and had leaves in it, and his eyes were wide and lonely. I shrugged I shrugged. Then I wiped my face with the sleeve of my coat. I came back. 3 kids passed above us on the bridge, shouting and running. "I'm a troll," whispered the troll in a small, scared voice. "Full roll, they all roll." He was trembling. I held out my hand and took his huge clawed paw in mine. I smiled at him. "It's okay," I told him. "Honestly, it's okay." The troll nodded. He pushed me to the ground, onto the leaves and the wrappers and the condom, and lowered himself off the top of me. Then he raised his head and opened his mouth and ate my life with his strong, sharp teeth. When he was finished, the troll stood up and brushed himself down. He put his hand into the pocket of his coat and pulled out a bubbly, burnt lump of clinker rock. He held it out to me. "This is yours," said the troll. I looked at him, wearing my life comfortably, easily, as if he'd been wearing it for years. I took the clinker from his hand and sniffed it. I could smell the train from which it had fallen so long ago. I gripped it tightly in my hairy hand. Thank you," I said. "Good luck," said the troll. "Yeah, well, you too." The troll grinned with my face. It turned its back on me and began to walk, back the way I had come, toward the village, back to the empty house I had left that morning, and it whistled as it walked. I've been here ever since, hiding, waiting, part of the bridge. I watch from the shadows as the people pass, walking their dogs or talking or doing the things that people do. Sometimes people pause beneath my bridge to stand or piss or make love, and I watch them but say nothing, and they never see me. All roll, they'll all roll. I'm just going to stay here in the darkness underneath the arch. I can hear you all out there, trip-trapping over my bridge. Oh yes, I can hear you, but I'm not coming out. Who would want to be a troll, guys? Who would swap their lives to live under a bridge? Yes, that was... We are currently 70 pages in the book. I think I am gonna probably end here because my throat is fucking stinging. And this will leave us a little bit more for next week. Also, I will probably be able to like go further the more we do this. So, in case of that, have a good night, guys. It's not that not because I don't feel well. It's just because my throat is not used to this. But I have someone for us to raid. Providence. He's a great guy. He streams Oxygen Not Included and shit like that. Had to walk the dog. Yeah, I'm just ending because this is a great time to end. We have read a couple of stories. I'm gonna put this on YouTube if you want to check it out. And we are gonna raid Providence. I'm sorry, Flexes. I'm sorry. Yeah, we are going to say hi to Providence. He's playing Oxygen Not Included. He's a great guy, and everyone enjoy your evening. I hope you enjoyed the short stories I've been reading up. I know I am not perfect at reading. There are some hard words there for my non-English speaker tongue, and yeah, But see you next time, and bye bye.